Что там есть что-нибудь, нет? почку отбил, почку. Ну да. Ну да. Вица. Виза он познакомился, да. Ну да, интересно. Чай. Опа. Ну ладно, такого не есть. Вот и говорит чай вкус, да, чай вкус, да. Сидячки, сидячки. Чё там? Чё? Мне даже так нравится. Нет, на себя так не будет. Да. Это есть тот самый город. Tinha que ter. Тот самый, да. Это ни хрена ты силы. Что ты? Иди. Ну, это да, да.
Не понял?
Считать надо и тогда
Да, мать, все. Ну какой брайтинг, ну шинки, понятно, как бы. Да, да, да. Ну, здесь. Любит. Ну, прыгай. Ну, да. Ну да. Бррр. Ну, да. Ну да. Ну да. Ну да. А чё такого-то? Плохо играет. Ну это... Не сижу. Бог.
Если ты хочешь узнать, как делать крутые дизайны, чтобы к тебе стояла очередь из клиентов, смотри видео до конца. Меня зовут Павел Герасимов.
This trio sonata by Arcangelo Corelli begins with a very nice example of musical imitation. The first violin presents a melodic theme, outlined in the blue box. This voice is called the leader. The second
It takes about 11 months to craft just one Steinway & Sons grand piano, and these instruments don't come cheap. A Model D concert piano in ebony, the most affordable finish of any Steinway piano, will cost you about $187,000. But that's nowhere near how high prices can reach. Steinway has produced two of the most expensive pianos in the world, worth over $2 million each. The next most expensive piano is half the price, at $1.2 million. But with several other premium pianos on the market, is there something about Steinway's sound that stands out? And is that what makes these pianos so expensive? Named the Rolls-Royce of pianos by the BBC, Steinway has produced some of the most sought-after grand pianos for over 160 years. It's the piano of choice for Billy Joel, Lang Lang, and many other professional musicians. But compared to other high-end piano makers, it's often Steinway's sound that sets it apart.
As a performer, I can wear many different masks depending on the piece that I'm playing. Because some pieces you want to be very, very diabolical, you know, Liszt, you know. And at the same time, lightness.
Creating that sound starts here in New York, at one of only 2 Steinway factories in the world. Each grand piano is 5 to 9 feet long and weighs between 540 and 990 pounds. Often, the bigger the piano, the pricier it will be. About 85% of a Steinway piano is made of wood, and one of the most crucial woods is used for the soundboard.
The soundboard is the life of the instrument, the soul of the instrument. This is Alaskan Sitka spruce. This is the most expensive wood that we have in the piano, and we actually get it from the trees primarily that are on the shady side, the north facing.
Переключайся просто, да, всё. Бесконцепциона, что.
When Final Fantasy X was announced at the tail end of 1999, the franchise had become cemented as one of the biggest in the world of video games. It had always been respected in Japan, but after Final Fantasy VII and VIII released as huge commercial and critical successes, and Final Fantasy Tactics was lauded by fans and critics alike, the reputation went global. Final Fantasy IX, which released during the development of Final Fantasy X, received similar attention to its predecessors, but with all eyes focused on the PlayStation 2, it was clear that the bar within the expectant fanbase would be raised yet again, just as it had been when the franchise transitioned over from the SNES to the PlayStation. Yoshinori Kitase was the man assigned yet again to ensure fans were not disappointed. He set out to make Final Fantasy X the most immersive game in the franchise to date, and he wanted to do this by taking full advantage of the PlayStation 2's improved hardware capabilities, but also internal developments at Square. We would see much more focus placed around gripping FMV sequences, but there would be numerous firsts, such as the addition of voice acting. Due to the amount of experimentation and collaboration involved with creating such a game, there are of course numerous stories that have crept out over the years relating to its creation. But due to its scale, there are also quite a few hidden details that reside within the final product that may have also been overlooked or just flat out missed. And that's what we're going to be running through today, with the hope that the ones we've selected are insightful on multiple levels beyond just being a headline. And that's the main criteria we always try to base our content on. Is there an interesting insight or angle to the wider story? That's why we won't be talking in more detail around quite common facts like when Final Fantasy X was unveiled for the first time at the Square Millennium event, Tidus had black hair as opposed to the blonde hair we're used to. Or that venerable voice actor John DiMaggio not only provided voices for Wakka and Kimahri, but he also was the voice of Bender in Futurama. What we're instead going to start off with is the lesser-known fact that Auron's big reveal within the game's story was, at one point within the game's development, planned to be Tidus's big reveal. As with many other Final Fantasy games, throughout development, the narrative of Final Fantasy X saw significant changes. For example, within its earlier stages, Yoshinori Kitase had envisioned a story that would focus around people who died when they turned 17, and that's why both Tidus and Yuna are 17 years old within the final product. They also scrapped most of the narrative halfway through development, and only retained Tidus and Yuna as characters, building out the rest of the cast from scratch. And it was in this stage when they were trying to build out these new characters that they ended up switching things around. Within the final product, Auron is revealed to be an unsent. It's hinted at throughout the story, but when you learned the truth just before the fight against Yunalesca, it added a whole new layer to Auron's journey and gave you extra impetus to fight. Needless to say, it was pretty impactful, but within one version of the script, this big reveal was planned for Tidus. The anecdote was shared within the Final Fantasy X Ultimania Omega by the game's scenario writer, Kazushige Nojima, where he noted that one day after writing the big reveal for Tidus, he watched The Sixth Sense and didn't feel so confident about the uniqueness of the story he'd just written, with them also realizing that it would not be plausible for Auron to keep travelling back and forth between Dreams Anakin if he was alive. They decided to transfer the story arc over to Auron instead of using it for Tidus. Within these earlier versions, prior to the
side of these islands, so they grow very little each year, and that means that we have growth rings that are very close together, not spaced apart.
Sitka spruce is used in other stringed instruments like guitars, and it grows in a few areas in the northwest US. But more than 50% of the Alaskan Sitka spruce source won't meet Steinway standards. The wood must have a very specific grain density and direction, both which can impact the quality of sound. Steinway looks for closely packed, straight notes. The elastic in the north is used in other stringed instruments like guitars, and it grows in a few areas in the northwest US. Standards. The wood must have a very specific grain density and direction. Standards. 50% of the Alaskan Sitka spruce they source won't meet Steinway standards. The wood must have a very specific grain density and direction, both which can impact the quality of sound. Steinway looks for closely packed, straight grains, no more than plus or minus 15 degrees off a 90-degree vertical grain. There's a reason it's so strict about this. It's partly why, when you press a key on a Steinway piano, you hear a distinctly long, sustained tone. The soundboard's edge must attach perfectly to the piano's rim, the curved wooden frame of the instrument. The full rim is made up of an inner and outer rim. Some piano makers attach each of these pieces separately, but at Steinway, a team of artisans bends both together. Steinway says this method gives the piano a stronger foundation, lowering the chances it will break. Steinway uses hard rock maple for both the inner and outer rims. The key here is to use wood that will, again, allow sound to flow freely.
Some companies, as an example, will have hard rock maple for the outside rim, but the inside rim, to save money, they'll use something like Luan. Luan is not as dense and hard as hard rock maple. And when you have your sound waves in that soundboard, some of them are being absorbed a little bit by that Luan, more than they would be by hard rock maple.
The consistent touch of the keys is another valuable element unique to each Steinway piano. There are just two artisans